The US Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has died following a brief and sudden illness at the age of 71. His office has released a statement saying he died on Saturday evening. Senator Graham's family appreciates privacy during this incredibly difficult period, it said.
Late on a Saturday evening in Washington, emergency vehicles pulled up outside the home of one of the most powerful men in the United States Senate. Just hours after returning from a high-stakes diplomatic trip abroad, Lindsey Graham was gone.
He was one of the funniest men I've ever known. In a tense diplomatic situation with a challenging meeting, he could break the ice, he could make everybody crack up.
Within minutes, the rumors ignited, fueling whispers across global capitals, high-level intelligence circles, and social media about what really happened in those final quiet moments before the news broke to the world. With official details regarding his sudden passing now confirmed, Graham is finally going to be laid to rest. A sudden void in global power. As Washington prepares for Graham's formal memorial services, including a scheduled tribute in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda on Tuesday, July 28th, the political focus has rapidly shifted to South Carolina and the battle for his vacant seat. Governor Henry McMaster officially appointed Graham's younger sister, Darlene Graham Nordone, to serve out the remainder of his term. Why that quick? In a major political development, Nordone subsequently announced her candidacy to run for the full 6-year term in the upcoming special primary, immediately picking up high-profile endorsements from President Donald Trump and the Republican Jewish coalition. Her entry sets the stage for a crowded and intense Republican primary fight, with prominent state party figures, including Representative Russell Fry and former Congressman Mark Sanford, also jumping into the contest ahead of the special election filing deadline. Despite several theories and foul play stories, recent official findings from Washington, D.C. Medical Examiner's Office have officially ruled out any suspicions of foul play or external factors in the sudden death of Senator Lindsey Graham, attributing his passing to a catastrophic aortic dissection. Pathologists reported that an unexpected tear developed in the inner wall of his primary artery, exacerbated by underlying arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Emergency dispatch logs reveal that first responders arrived at his Capitol Hill residence shortly after 8 p.m. following an emergency cardiac arrest call. Though paramedics administered CPR at the scene and rushed him to George Washington University Hospital, he was pronounced dead later that evening. Authorities confirmed that the brief presence of federal agents at his home immediately following the event was standard procedure to secure sensitive materials, given Graham's high-level security clearances and his recent return from an official diplomatic mission in Ukraine. But is it really? Because when word flashed across global news wires on a quiet weekend night that United States Senator Lindsey Graham was dead at 71, the political world went into an immediate state of shock. Power centers from Washington to European capitals were caught entirely off guard. There had been no public announcements of a long illness, no slow fade from the public eye, and no subtle signals that one of the most prominent lawmakers in American history was preparing to step back. Just 24 hours earlier, Graham had been standing on the international stage, holding high-level meetings with key foreign officials, conducting fiery press conferences, and projecting the same relentless, razor-sharp political energy that had defined his 30 years in federal office. The sheer suddenness of his passing created an instant vacuum in American governance, and whenever a major political titan vanishes without warning, speculation rushes in to fill the silence. The surrounding circumstances only fueled the intense atmosphere of intrigue that took hold of Washington within minutes of the initial reports. Graham was not just any member of Congress. He was a unique political figure who sat directly at the intersection of American national security, judicial nominations, global diplomacy, and presidential power. As the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee and a senior member of the Judiciary and Appropriations Committees, he wielded extraordinary influence over the military, the courts, and federal spending. In the days immediately leading up to his final moments, Graham had undertaken a grueling, high-stakes diplomatic trip to Eastern Europe, meeting face-to-face with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv to push for expanded wartime aid and aggressive defense strategies. He was constantly moving through volatile geopolitical zones, positioning himself as a primary force behind crucial foreign policy maneuvers. When someone with that level of global reach and access to classified intelligence suddenly dies right after returning from a war zone, the imagination of the global political community naturally runs wild. Almost immediately, analysts, political insiders, and global observers began dissecting every detail of his final days. Why had he appeared completely energetic in photos taken in Kyiv just 48 hours prior? What sensitive discussions had taken place behind closed doors regarding defense pacts and international strategy? Within hours of the emergency medical call at his residence, specialized law enforcement vehicles and federal agents were spotted near his Capitol Hill home. For a senior senator holding top-tier security clearances and deeply involved in international diplomacy, such an official presence is standard procedure to secure sensitive documents, classified communications, and government equipment. Yet, to an anxious public watching breaking news feeds late at night, the sudden movement of federal authorities only intensified the sense that something massive, complex, and deeply consequential was unfolding behind the scenes. The geopolitical timing of his passing added another layer of intense curiosity to the story. Foreign leaders, including Ukrainian officials and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, immediately issued statements reflecting total disbelief at how quickly events had transpired. In Washington, the implications were staggering. Graham was a linchpin in the Senate, a dealmaker who possessed direct, anytime access to President Donald Trump while maintaining working relationships across the aisle. His sudden absence meant that delicate legislative coalitions, major pending judicial strategy, and critical foreign policy initiatives were instantly thrown into uncertainty. The news sent shockwaves through South Carolina as well, where he had just secured the nomination for another 6-year term, triggering a rapid and unexpected scramble for political power in his home state. This sudden disruption of the political landscape created an atmosphere rife with unanswered questions. People wondered how a leader who appeared so vital and engaged on Friday could be gone by Saturday evening. How would his loss shift the balance of power inside the Senate? And what would it mean for the administration's foreign policy agenda? The dramatic sequence of events, from a high-profile wartime meeting in Europe to a sudden late-night emergency call in the nation's capital, guaranteed that the circumstances surrounding his final hours would be examined under an intense global spotlight before the official records were fully laid out. What actually transpired in the final hours of Senator Lindsey Graham's life? 8 p.m. on Capitol Hill. The real timeline. Behind the intense atmosphere of global speculation and breaking news bulletins, the official timeline of events moves with sobering clarity. On a Saturday evening that began like many others, the 71-year-old lawmaker had just returned to his Washington residence following an exhausting foreign trip. Having logged thousands of miles across overseas war zones and held high-stakes discussions with foreign leaders, Graham was visibly fatigued but actively communicating with key political allies, including President Donald Trump, shortly after landing. By 8 in the evening, however, emergency dispatch logs recorded an urgent call for paramedics to respond to a severe cardiac event at his Capitol Hill home. First responders arrived within minutes, attempting life-saving measures before rushing him to George Washington University Hospital, where doctors ultimately pronounced him dead. The immediate public confusion was heightened by the brief appearance of federal authorities near his residence shortly after the medical call was placed. Given Graham's status as a top-ranking member of key Senate committees holding ultra-sensitive national security clearances, standard federal protocol immediately went into effect. Law enforcement officers and intelligence personnel were deployed not to investigate a crime scene, but to secure classified documents, government communication channels, and secure digital infrastructure housed in his private office. This routine administrative safeguard, necessary for any high-ranking official with access to top-tier state secrets, was misunderstood by an anxious public watching unfolding events in real time. Medical examiners quickly cleared up any lingering mystery surrounding the cause of his passing. Official preliminary findings released by the medical examiner of the District of Columbia confirmed that Graham suffered a catastrophic aortic dissection stemming from underlying cardiovascular disease. An aortic dissection occurs when a sudden tear develops in the inner layer of the body's main artery, causing massive internal bleeding and immediate systemic failure. Cardiovascular experts noted that such events strike without warning, often mimicking routine exhaustion or chest strain before proving fatal within minutes. The physical strain of international travel, combined with the relentless demands of high-level Senate leadership, had masked the internal medical crisis taking place. With the medical facts established, the focus immediately shifted to administrative succession and constitutional continuity. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster acted swiftly under state law, appointing Graham's younger sister, Darlene Graham Nordoni, to temporarily fill the vacant Senate seat and complete his active term. The decision ensured uninterrupted representation for South Carolina while setting the stage for a fast-tracked special primary election to determine who will carry the party's banner into the general election. The rapid transition brought a tragic end to a decades-long career, replacing wild speculation with the stark reality of a sudden medical crisis that took one of Washington's most durable figures. How did a small-town lawyer from central South Carolina manage to hold the levers of federal power in Washington for over 3 decades? Holding the levers, the Senate's ultimate broker. Lindsey Graham's long political ascendancy was defined by an extraordinary capacity to navigate the corridors of Capitol Hill with tactical legal precision, sharp political instincts, and an aggressive foreign policy vision. Throughout his near quarter century in the United States Senate, Graham transformed himself from a conservative backbencher into one of the most indispensable power brokers in modern American politics. Sitting at the helm of several top-tier congressional committees, he exercised vast control over federal spending, lifetime judicial appointments, and grand national security strategy. His distinct influence was felt across multiple presidential administrations, where he consistently operated as a formidable negotiator, a chief legislative architect, and an authoritative voice on international diplomacy and global defense. As chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee during some of the most contentious legislative fights in recent memory, Graham oversaw a sweeping generational transformation of the federal judiciary. His aggressive leadership proved decisive in shepherding dozens of conservative appellate judges into lifetime positions, culminating in the swift, high-stakes confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Graham turned the committee into a central engine for judicial nominations and constitutional strategy, defending conservative legal principles while maintaining close working relationships with executive branch decision-makers. Later, as chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, he shepherded landmark tax legislation and comprehensive spending packages through complex parliamentary procedures, demonstrating an exceptional ability to maintain strict party discipline and secure vital legislative victories when congressional vote margins were razor-thin across the chamber. Yet, beyond his committee gavels, Graham's primary focus and national influence lay in foreign policy and international security strategy. A staunch defense hawk and the last surviving member of the influential Senate trio known as the Three Amigos, alongside the late Senators John McCain and Joe Lieberman, Graham campaigned tirelessly for strong American military intervention abroad. He logged dozens of official diplomatic missions to volatile overseas war zones, assessing frontline conditions and consulting directly with military commanders, foreign heads of state, and intelligence officials. His hawkish doctrine heavily shaped congressional debates on national defense, securing billions in foreign military aid and reinforcing crucial strategic partnerships with key overseas allies, including Israel and Ukraine, during periods of intense international conflict, geopolitical turbulence, and widespread political uncertainty. Within the executive branch, Graham functioned as an indispensable liaison between Capitol Hill and the Oval Office. Presidents, cabinet secretaries, and senior foreign ambassadors frequently sought his counsel on complex foreign policy dilemmas and sensitive legislative negotiations. He possessed a remarkable ability to translate executive priorities into legislative results, making him a key advisor during major international crises, cabinet confirmations, and domestic stalemates. His rare positioning allowed him to directly shape defense authorization bills, intelligence oversight parameters, and judicial confirmations, effectively bridging the institutional gap between the legislative and executive branches across several presidential administrations in Washington. Ultimately, Graham's enduring political clout stemmed from a pragmatic willingness to exercise power directly, rather than retreat into pure partisan rhetoric. While remaining a loyal party figure, he repeatedly crossed the aisle to build bipartisan coalitions on national intelligence reauthorizations, strategic defense spending, and comprehensive immigration reform when national interest required action. This potent mix of hawkish conviction, legislative maneuverability, and unprecedented presidential access ensured that his influence reached into every tier of federal governance, cementing his legacy as one of the most consequential, adaptable, and formidable conservative leaders in modern United States Senate history. How did one of Donald Trump's most vocal primary critics transform into one of his most trusted Senate allies and frequent golf partners, from bitter enemies to the Oval Office inner circle? The political evolution of the relationship between Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump stands as one of the most remarkable and pragmatic political realignments in modern American history. During the heated 2016 Republican presidential primary, the two men engaged in fierce public combat. Graham famously called Trump a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot, while Trump responded by reading Graham's personal cell phone number aloud on national television. At the time, few political observers could have predicted that these bitter primary opponents would eventually form one of the most potent legislative partnerships in Washington. Yet, following Trump's victory in 2016, Graham quickly recognized a fundamental truth about the changing political landscape. The Republican base had irrevocably shifted, and the path to advancing his own conservative priorities, particularly judicial appointments and defense spending, ran directly through the Oval Office. Rather than retreating into permanent opposition, Graham chose to engage directly with the new president. What began as cautious outreach quickly evolved into a deep personal and strategic alliance. Graham became a frequent guest at the White House and Mar-a-Lago, using his wit, Southern charm, and deep knowledge of parliamentary rules to position himself as an indispensable advisor to the president. This unlikely bond paid immediate political dividends for both men. For Trump, Graham provided critical institutional credibility within a Senate establishment that was initially skeptical of the former real estate mogul's populist movement. Graham acted as a crucial bridge, translating the administration's outsider populist energy into actionable legislative policy on Capitol Hill. During the high-stakes 2018 confirmation battles for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, Graham's fiery, impassioned defense of Kavanaugh turned the tide of the hearings, cementing his status as a folk hero among grassroots conservatives and securing his position in Trump's innermost circle. Throughout Trump's first term and subsequent 2024 campaign, Graham maintained unprecedented access to the president, frequently joining him on the golf course to discuss cabinet picks, foreign policy crises, and judicial strategy. When Trump faced impeachments and mounting legal challenges, Graham consistently took to national television to mount aggressive defenses of the former president, using his background as a former military prosecutor to dismantle Democratic arguments. In return, Graham gained direct executive backing for South Carolina economic projects, high-level defense authorizations, and key administrative appointments, proving that his proximity to power delivered tangible results for his home state. However, the alliance was never a relationship of complete subservience. Graham was one of the few figures in Washington capable of publicly disagreeing with Trump while maintaining his personal standing. A steadfast foreign policy hawk, Graham routinely used his influence to push the administration toward a firmer stance on international security advocating aggressively for aid to Ukraine, security guarantees for Israel, and maximum pressure campaigns against foreign adversaries. Even when their foreign policy views diverged, Trump respected Graham's loyalty, combativeness, and unwavering political instincts, maintaining close personal contact with the senator right up until Graham's final hours in July 2026. Graham's partnership with Donald Trump demonstrated his supreme pragmatism and acute understanding of power dynamics in Washington. By choosing influence over ideological purity, Graham ensured that he remained at the very center of American political decision-making throughout the Trump era. He proved that in the fast-moving arena of national politics, yesterday's fiercest rival can become tomorrow's most essential ally if both share a drive to win and execute power at the highest level. What molded the razor-sharp political instincts and deep-seated hawkishness that defined Lindsey Graham's decades on the national stage? Central South Carolina, the fire that forged the fighter. Long before he held court in committee rooms or advised presidents in the Oval Office, Graham's worldview was forged in the small working-class town of Central South Carolina. Raised in a modest family above the Sanitary Cafe, a local pool hall, bar, and liquor store owned and run by his parents, he learned the intricacies of human nature, retail politics, and community dynamics from an early age. His childhood was defined by hard work, but it was abruptly shattered during his college years at the University of South Carolina when tragedy struck in rapid succession. Within a 15-month span, both of his parents passed away, leaving the 21-year-old Graham as the primary legal guardian for his 13-year-old sister, Darlene. Balancing his legal studies with raising his younger sibling instilled in him an intense work ethic, emotional resilience, and a pragmatic drive to survive that would later characterize his aggressive approach to political battles in Washington. After completing his undergraduate degree and earning his Juris Doctor from the University of South Carolina School of Law, Graham channeled his legal training directly into public service by joining the United States Air Force in 1982. Serving on active duty as a military prosecutor and defense attorney in the Air Force Judge Advocate General's JAG Corps, he honed his courtroom skills and developed a deep, lifelong connection to the American military establishment. His active duty service stationed him in Europe, where he prosecuted court-martial cases and witnessed firsthand the strategic dynamics of Cold War military readiness. Even after transitioning out of active duty to launch a private legal practice in South Carolina, Graham maintained a steadfast commitment to the armed forces, serving in the South Carolina Air National Guard, and later the Air Force Reserve. Over the course of his 33-year military career, Graham rose to the rank of colonel, making him one of the few members of Congress in recent decades with extensive real-world experience in uniform. During the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, he took short active duty leaves from the United States Senate to deploy overseas as a reservist, advising commanders on military justice, legal rule of law initiatives, and detainee operations. This dual perspective, as both a sitting lawmaker who voted on military authorizations and a uniformed officer who served on the ground, profoundly shaped his unwavering belief in robust military intervention, global defense readiness, and American leadership on the world stage. His early struggles and disciplined military background laid the foundational bedrock for the formidable, combat-ready politician who would go on to shape national security policy for a generation. How does a small-town lawyer from South Carolina transition into one of the most formidable, controversial, and defining congressional figures of a generation? 30 years in the trenches, impeachments, wars, and party feuds. Lindsey Graham's entry into federal politics in 1994 marked the beginning of a 30-year legislative journey characterized by high-stakes battles, national media dominance, and frequent ideological realignments. Elected to the United States House of Representatives during the historical Republican takeover led by Newt Gingrich, Graham quickly distinguished himself as an ambitious, sharp-tongued legal strategist. His national profile exploded in 1998 when he served as one of the House impeachment managers during the trial of President Bill Clinton. Showing off his courtroom background as a former military prosecutor, Graham's televised Southern-inflected arguments brought him directly into living rooms across the nation, establishing him as a rising star within conservative political circles. When legendary South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond retired in 2002, Graham seized the opportunity, winning the vacant Senate seat and launching a multi-decade tenure in the upper chamber. In the Senate, Graham forged a legendary political brotherhood with Arizona Senator John McCain. Alongside independent Senator Joe Lieberman, the trio became known as the Three Amigos, roaming the globe to advocate for an aggressive, interventionist foreign policy. Graham was an unapologetic foreign policy hawk, consistently demanding robust military budgets, strong surveillance authorities, and decisive American action against foreign regimes. To his supporters, Graham was a tireless champion of national security who understood the necessity of American strength. To his foreign policy critics, his hawkish stances perpetuated endless overseas entanglements. Yet Graham's career was defined as much by his willingness to break with his own party as it was by his hawkish orthodoxy. During the George W. Bush and Barack Obama presidencies, he earned a reputation as a pragmatic negotiator who was unafraid to challenge conservative purity tests. He repeatedly angered primary voters in South Carolina by co-authoring comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform bills, arguing that the country needed a realistic legal path forward for undocumented workers alongside enhanced border security. He worked with climate-conscious Democrats on energy policy, voted to confirm Supreme Court Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, and regularly brokered compromise deals to avoid federal government shutdowns. This willingness to compromise drew fierce condemnation from grassroots conservatives who regularly threatened him with primary challenges and accused him of being a Republican in name only. Despite the fierce opposition from his party's right flank, Graham's political survival instincts were unmatched. He possessed an uncanny ability to read the political room and adapt to shifts in the electorate. Nowhere was this adaptability more visible than during his relationship with Donald Trump. After running against Trump in 2016 as a fierce defender of traditional Reaganite conservatism, Graham underwent a dramatic metamorphosis following Trump's victory. Recognizing that the Republican electorate had changed, Graham pivoted from harsh critic to primary defender, using his platform on the Senate Judiciary Committee to defend Trump against federal investigations and shepherd dozens of conservative judges onto the bench. His passionate, blistering defense of Brett Kavanaugh, albeit during his turbulent 2018 Supreme Court confirmation hearings, endeared Graham to Trump's base, effectively quashing intra-party dissent in South Carolina. Throughout his career, Graham's willingness to maneuver across the political chessboard earned him intense admiration from his allies and sharp criticism from his opponents. Detractors viewed his shifts as opportunistic political survival, pointing to moments like his floor speech following the events of January 6, 2021, where he dramatically declared he was out, only to return to Trump's inner circle shortly thereafter. Allies, however, countered that Graham was a master parliamentarian who understood that purity without power yields zero results. He was a pragmatic dealmaker who preferred sitting at the decision-making table over standing on the sidelines. Whether leading judicial battles, drafting landmark budget bills, or shaping international sanctions, Graham remained an unstoppable legislative force whose maneuvers shaped 3 decades of American political history. How does the sudden departure of a titan reshape the state and the nation he spent over 3 decades serving? South Carolina's future. As Washington prepares to honor Lindsey Graham with formal memorial services and a solemn tribute in the United States Capitol Rotunda, the national political landscape is already shifting beneath the weight of his absence. His final years in the Senate were defined by the same relentless legislative energy that had characterized his entire career. Even as he crossed into his 70s, Graham showed no signs of slowing his pace, securing the Republican nomination for a 5th Senate term in June 2026, and maintaining a punishing travel schedule across overseas war zones. His unexpected passing on July 11, 2026, closed the final chapter on one of the most durable, influential, and complex political careers in modern congressional history. Graham's enduring legacy is deeply etched into the institutional framework of American governance. As a long-standing leader on the Senate Judiciary and Budget Committees, he directly shaped the ideological direction of the federal bench for generations, shepherding 3 Supreme Court justices into lifetime seats and cementing a conservative judicial majority. In national security, he remained the preeminent voice of traditional American interventionism, bridging the gap between Cold War-era defense doctrines and modern geopolitical warfare. His legislative achievements, ranging from defense authorization packages to key judicial strategies, demonstrated a rare mastery of Senate procedure that made him an indispensable asset to his party and a formidable opponent across the aisle. Yet, Graham's true political brilliance lay in his remarkable capacity for personal adaptation and power preservation. He navigated 3 distinct eras of conservative politics: the Gingrich Revolution of the 90s, the McCain-era foreign policy establishment of the 2000s, and the populist realignment of the modern Trump movement. By transforming himself from Donald Trump's primary antagonist into one of his closest confidants, Graham proved that he valued practical results over rigid ideological purism. His ability to maintain top-tier access to the Oval Office while preserving working relationships with congressional Democrats allowed him to exercise direct power until his final hours, proving that in the high-stakes arena of Washington politics, influence is earned by those willing to stay at the negotiating table. In South Carolina, his passing has triggered an immediate, high-stakes political realignment that will reverberate for years to come. Following Governor Henry McMaster's appointment of Graham's younger sister, Darlene Graham Nordone, to temporarily fill the vacant seat, the state now faces an intense special primary election to determine who will carry the conservative torch into the next full Senate term. With key national endorsements, including backing from President Donald Trump, already flowing toward Nordone, alongside a growing field of prominent state contenders like Representative Russell Fry and former Congressman Mark Sanford, the battle for South Carolina's political future promises to be one of the most closely watched races in the country. He was a small-town lawyer who rose to advise world leaders, a military prosecutor who became a champion of global defense, and a master parliamentarian whose tactical maneuvering helped define 30 years of American lawmaking. As Capitol Hill bids farewell to one of its most recognizable and sharp-witted figures, the United States Senate loses not just a veteran lawmaker, but a bridge to an era of political warfare defined by larger-than-life personalities who shaped history through sheer force of will. Whether remembered as a relentless foreign policy hawk, a master parliamentarian, or a consummate political survivor, Lindsey Graham spent over 30 years at the absolute center of American power. His sudden passing brings a dramatic end to a career that continuously reshaped judicial battles, executive alliances, and international security. As South Carolina prepares to chart its political future in the upcoming special election, the legacy of the small-town boy from central South Carolina will cast a long shadow over Washington and the nation for decades to come. Subscribe for more deeply researched political breakdowns and historical deep dives.